Welcome to this week's Movie Math, where basically all of America went to the movies, including me. And after we take a look at the weekend box office, I'll be giving you my own review of The Great Gatsby, who appears to be a worthy rival for another rich playboy, Tony Stark. Yes, while Iron Man 3 held on to the #1 spot, it fell about 10% more than the Avengers did in its second weekend. Was that due to Gatsby fever sweeping the nation, or did Marvel Studios make a critical error in ticking off fanboys with the twist? Either way, it was close, but no cigar for Iron Man 3 in its hopes of beating the Avengers to $1 billion, as on day 19 it had only reached about $950 million worldwide. Poor Disney. Interestingly, we're entering a new era in Hollywood where reaching $1 billion isn't quite as big a deal anymore, at least for these 3D blockbusters, as it becomes a question of when rather than if. Meanwhile, just across the way, Gatsby moved into second place as Warner Brothers threw a lavish party and a ton of moviegoers showed up. Gatsby was expected to open in the 30s, but instead debuted with around $50 million. That makes it a phenomenon on par with Sex and the City, another movie which captured moviegoers' imagination not just in the theater, but outside as well. In fact, according to a Fandango poll, about half of those seeing the flick have thrown or are planning to throw their own Gatsby-themed party. But while Carrie & Company brought out the female demographic in force, Gatsby the movie, like the man, is appealing to both sexes, with men making up 41% of the audience. This was the second biggest opening of Leonardo DiCaprio's career after Inception, and by far and away the biggest for Baz Luhrmann, whose name is probably popping up on studio shortlists all over town this morning. Only Tobey Maguire has fared better in the past thanks to Spider-Man, yet expect the success of this movie to also put him back on the studio's radar after disappearing for 4 years. And while the soundtrack has been strongly dividing audiences and critics alike, that didn't stop it from driving up the sales charts as fast as Gatsby into the city. As for the rest of the box office, it looked as bleak as Wilson's Garage, as no other movie was able to bring in more than $5 million. Tyler Perry's Peoples only brought in a third of what was projected, leaving one to wonder if it was the film's lack of star power and/or lack of Perry's trademark melodrama or Medea that did the film in. Or perhaps Perry's rep is finally beginning to crumble under his uneven proliferation. I am just so surprised at the divisive reaction to this movie. It's almost like Man of Steel. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But, I see some comments where people are just in love with The Great Gatsby, and I see some comments where people are just appalled. It seems that Baz Luhrmann's choice to create such a bold mise-en-scène and to use a modern-day soundtrack has just put up a wall for some people that they just can't get past. And it's also made them feel that the film is very shallow. And to have that reaction from such a large group of people, you can't deny it. That's a failure to some degree on Baz Luhrmann's part. But I was part of the group that is just enchanted by this film. And I don't feel it's shallow at all. As a matter of fact, I feel it has one of the most amazing, bold, unique messages that you don't really see a lot in movies these days. It's a huge referendum on America that really comes out of left field. And it's fascinating to see it come from a foreign director. You see a lot of times these movies seem political and they're usually about like the war in Iraq, but this is a different kind of criticism which was fascinating, and I also think right on the money. But I also say that to me The Great Gatsby isn't just my favorite movie of the year so far, but I would say this is a movie that I think is one of the best films ever made. I'm considering taking one of my top 3 films, Rear Window, Raising Arizona, and The Dark Knight, and replacing one of them with The Great Gatsby, because it just spoke to me and captured my imagination so much. So let me try to go through that, because you'll notice that it's gonna be a little difficult for me to talk about this movie because I'm trying not to give spoilers. Let's first talk about, I think, the meaning of the film, because that's where I think that the film is getting tripped up. People are saying, oh, it's not hard enough on capitalism, and it's making everybody want to celebrate capitalism instead of rally against it, which is what F. Scott Fitzgerald intended. And I would counter that that is actually not what The Great Gatsby is about. It's not condemning capitalism or wealth. Instead, I think it's really pointing out that there is a class system in America. And America likes to think there isn't a class system here. That's the whole reason we revolted from the British, because in America, anyone has the chance to make it. And so, but what F. Scott Fitzgerald is saying is there is a class system that exists. It's just very deeply hidden. So when you're reaching for the stars or reaching across the lake like Gatsby is, that's why it's all the more heartbreaking and gut-wrenching when you find yourself run smack into that class system and find out that you just cannot get in, which is a really
as I said, a very powerful message that isn't said a lot, and it's scary to have to contemplate, but I think it's worth contemplating. I will, so that's what, and also some people are saying that, oh, I didn't like Daisy, she didn't do a good job, Carey Mulligan, and there was no chemistry between Leonardo DiCaprio and Carey Mulligan. And I would say that there isn't supposed to be. They aren't really in love with each other, and I think that's an important message in the film. Gatsby is in love with an ideal that Daisy represents. He would have fallen in love, I think, with any girl who had been at that party in Louisiana who had represented what Daisy did. She just happened to be a stand-in. And that's why you'll see in the film it's so hard for him to let her go. And then as far as Daisy is concerned, Daisy is just looking for a man. I don't think she ever truly fell in love with Gatsby. She never really knew Gatsby. And so she too, she's in love with this idea of this Prince Charming that Gatsby creates. So on that note, let's move over to the visuals. I was super impressed with the visuals on this film. Someone in the audience review likened it to a dream, and I thought that was perfect. It was like stepping into a snow globe. And it really was like a modern-day 1920s fairy tale. I've seen people refer to Gatsby's house as like the Cinderella's castle from Disney, and it totally has that look. And even Gatsby, even pulling back the curtain to look at Nick Carraway at the beginning of the film, not only do I think that's like an ode to like Snow White with the evil queen looking down, but also that's also very old Hollywood. That's very seems pulled out of like Rebecca, like the Hitchcock films. I think Baz Luhrmann did a great job with Gatsby, not only telling the story, but mimicking some of the storytelling techniques of the 1940s and those older films. Not only also in the techniques, but also even in the grandness of the film, which pulled a lot of people in. And I think it has that epic quality, which is another reason I think it's one of the greatest films. But so the visuals I thought were just fantastic, and it was interesting to see a fairy tale where it focused, where the princess, Daisy, wasn't important. It's all about the prince. They turned it around on its head, which was great. And I also thought the relationship between Gatsby and Nick Carraway was really well done. And it was funny to watch it because I know that Tobey Maguire and Leonardo DiCaprio are friends in real life. And I think they captured it wonderfully. I've also, on that note, I've also heard people say they didn't like Tobey Maguire's performance. I think this is the best thing I've ever seen Tobey Maguire do. He had very difficult lines where he had to tactfully try and measure Gatsby's expectations, or lower them, or manage them, I guess is the right term. And he could have come across as a jerk, or someone who believed his own hype, or believed Gatsby's hype. But I thought Tobey Maguire did a great job of making Nick Carraway someone who was on the inside and the outside, as the character says, but at the same time making that character sympathetic, which I think was hard to do. And so hats off to him. So I really do feel this is DiCaprio, Maguire, and Luhrmann's film, and Catherine Martin also for the set design. But so if you're going to see this film, I think you have to see it in 3D, because it's like jumping into this fantasy. And I think if you hold it at arm's length, you're not going to get that feeling. Because, again, I don't want to give anything away, but there's this image at the end of the film where Nick Carraway is on Gatsby's dock, and you see suddenly this haunting image of Gatsby at the end of that dock reaching out, not just towards Daisy. I mean, it's supposed to be that he's reaching towards Daisy, but the deeper meaning is that he's reaching out for that better life, that life he's always wanted. And I just thought that was so haunting to me, and so captured, the drive of the American middle class, and for F. Scott Fitzgerald and an extension Luhrmann to maybe put the idea out there that of how much further away that goal of reaching like the wealthy upper class really is, and it's much further away than it seems, like you're always going to be reaching, was just a bold statement, and a very tricky one to pull across. So I just thought it was a fantastic film, and I thought the soundtrack didn't pull me out of it. I thought it did a great job to make this seem like a more timeless story, and I was just really impressed with this film. And so that's how I feel about Gatsby. I could talk about Gatsby for a very long time, and I could also watch Gatsby on an endless loop. I just was enchanted with the message, and it had shades of Sunset Boulevard in it, but it managed to have all this, but still be its own movie. And for instance, the use of like the, almost like the Haunted Mansion type, Captain Nemo. I forget the name of what that instrument's called that he plays in his house, though. Created such a great ominous feeling as well. I was just really impressed. Overall, but while I'm mentioning all these other films, I think bottom line, I would describe The Great Gatsby as almost Titanic. another iconic DiCaprio role, which I think is heavily mirrored here. But Titanic meets Citizen Kane, and which is also because I think Leonardo DiCaprio also has a little bit of Orson Welles vibe. But I was just so impressed. I thought this really was Baz Luhrmann's opus. Potentially, I feel the role of DiCaprio's career. And so I encourage you to have a little bit of, let's have a little bit of that. We've talked about, I see the discussion a little bit in the audience reaction video, but let's discuss this deeper meaning here. And I encourage you to see The Great Gatsby in 3D, and maybe to see it more than once. Maybe maybe I'm missing something that you think that I've missed, and talk about what you think that I think that you might have missed. But I'm just enchanted, and I can't tell you how much I liked this film. It just is incredible. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll check out these other BTT episodes. Bye.